Hey, folks, and welcome to the strategy session. I'm joined tonight by Joe Trippi, the great Joe Trippi, and Stuart Stevens, equally great in every respect. We are going to talk about vermin and Donald Trump's increasingly scary fascist-level rhetoric this week. We're going to talk about the terrible, horrible, no good debate from last week. We're going to talk a little bit about how the economy may be a secret weapon for Joe Biden going forward. We're going to cover a bunch of other things, some predictions, some things we're watching. So, as always on a Tuesday night, gentlemen, let's get the party started. I want to start with you, Stuart, because you've got a new book out essentially about this subject. Trump's rhetoric about purging the vermin, imprisoning his opponents, deporting 10 million people, all of it has a lot of historical resonance for folks. And while we try to avoid jumping straight to the Nazi comparisons, he really is making it difficult not to at this point. Talk to us a little bit about how you see the authoritarian movement breaking through as expressed by Trump's statements and speeches and tweets and those of his allies this week.
Well, an essential step in this is a normalization of it. So,
right.
It's this constant thing we've seen since Trump emerged. In our system, parties have to form a circuit breaker purpose, and they've never pulled a circuit breaker. So I think there's a lot of people out there that have looked at Donald Trump from the very beginning and think, the guy's a little weird. I don't know. Who is this guy from Queens? I don't know. But then their senator endorses him and their governor endorses him.
Right.
And they think, well, that person knows him better than I do, so he must be okay. Then it allows you to be for Trump. So when Trump goes out and says this stuff and the party does nothing, the party, Ronna McDaniel goes out and says, I will endorse him. It normalizes this. So, you have DeSantis. It's not just Trump. You have DeSantis taking this language that we've always used, that we should reduce the size of the federal government. Okay, fine. What he says is, let's get them and slit their throats. You know, instead of just opposing Fauci, which, he has to go out and say,
I'm going to throw him across the river.
That little elf across the Potomac, which is particularly ironic given DeSantis, sort of elf-like qualities himself.
Yes.
But this just becomes standard. You saw it in the debate, which was this sort of childlike, my daddy can beat up your daddy sort of debate over who could be express the most anger and violence toward pretty much everybody but the Canadians. And I imagine that's coming in the next debate.
Well, Ramaswamy, though, he's always warning us about the maple peril.
Yeah, that's true.
But I had Stuart on the podcast, that Trippy show this week, and we talked about the 5 things that the Republican Party has put together, that the MAGA cult has put together to take on ending democracy, which he lays out so well in the book. But the number one thing was the idea of it's not media, it's propagandists. It is a propaganda machine. And so when you get to vermin, when you get to the propaganda that Trump and the MAGA cult is spewing, what's fascinating about it is you look at how the New York Times covered that in the headline, and the way the Washington Post finally called it out for what it was, repeating the words of Hitler and Mussolini.
Right.
But I also had on this week, it's coming out Friday, Brian Stelter, whose book, Network of Lies, and he calls it out as what it is. He calls it out as propaganda, and that that what's really happening, and it's why the press doesn't quite get this right. They're not equipped to fight propaganda. They still think we're in this thing. And I just think that's so important about what Stuart calls out in his book. In fact, I keep saying this, if there's 2 books you should be reading right now because they're great companions, is Stuart's book that just came out, and I'm spacing on the title, so Rick help me or Stuart.
Conspiracy to End America.
Yeah, to End America. And he lays it out. And Right. No. But that book, in conjunction with Brian Stelter's Network of Lies, it just tells you how important this propaganda machine and Trump's rhetoric and the way the Republicans don't stand up to it. And actually, is the second part of Stuart's book is that it takes a major party kind of parroting it and making it okay, which is what you were talking about, Rick. I mean, it's very important stuff. I hope people will look at both of those books.
It's interesting because I interviewed Stelter also this week, and when I was writing a piece that I did this week about the Trumpian rhetoric and all these promises, and I thought, okay, I'll get 4 or 5 articles and I'll sort of build something around that. But I started digging, and in the last 3 weeks, there have been about 40 articles where Trump's people are bragging about this. They are out there pushing it, and they're out there saying it. And it reminds me, because again, the Hitler comparison is always, troublesome. Mm-hmm. But as I wrote this week, in Rwanda, back in the early 90s, there was a radio network called RTLM. It was the Rwandan Propaganda Network. It was their Fox Radio. They spent 100 days talking about the Tutsis, and they called them, see if this sounds familiar, folks, cockroaches, traitors, spiders, snakes, vermin, rats, saboteurs. And in 100 days of broadcasting, it triggered one of the worst genocides in modern history. There were over 1 million people killed in a country of 3 million people. And that was old-fashioned AM radio. Mm-hmm. And so this rhetoric that Trump is deploying right now, and it's juiced and superpowered by all of the social media platforms in the world, including Elon's house of, alt-right horrors on Twitter. This message is getting out there to people loud and clear. And we should be much more concerned, I think, about this as a country. And, tonight when the New York Times puts out a headline, and God knows I love Maggie and Jonathan and Charlie Savage. They're great reporters, and I know they don't write the headlines, but it's like Trump campaign pushes back against contentious rhetoric. Contentious rhetoric is not, I want to put my opponents in prison camps. Contentious rhetoric is like, I dislike your policy, sir. I mean, the media, I think, as you're right, Joe, they're not calibrated to handle this kind of existential crisis or threat. And they really are not built to explicate for people just how serious Trump is about this time and how bad it'll be. Last time they didn't know how to run the government. Now they do.
No, but even Biden and the Democrats were not up to it. I mean, we just don't. It's the normalcy bias. You want to believe that this can't happen here, and it can happen here. It is happening here. It is part of their plan, and they are implementing it. And the press doesn't get how serious this is, nor and I mean, good friends. I mean, good people who work hard, but they don't. That's what I mean. I don't blame anybody for not getting it, but like, wake up, because it's not about Biden being too old. It's about this guy basically starting to push clear fascist crap and a party that's willing to empower it.
Let me just jump in and say the seminal book of our time is Rick Wilson's Everything Trump Touches Dies. Now, it turns out that, that might include democracy.
Yeah, actually, that's
really
true.
I mean, I will say, I went back and reread some of the book, and it is extraordinarily prescient. And it just speaks in a way, it's a phrase that's going to be remembered, 50 years from now. And it really just lays out. I mean, I don't know why, but Rick had some weird vision into how this was going to unfold, which probably is some deep darkness inside of Rick that we should all be worried about. But it was it was there. And
there it is.
Rick's your name.
Yeah. Listen, if you haven't reread that book, because everybody here should certainly have read it once, go back. It's going to shock you with its relevance to this moment. And it came out in when, Rick? 16?
No, it actually came out in 18.
18.
But it was written over 90 days in the fall of 17. So it was a pretty quick turnaround on it. And I've been thinking about a lot of those things up to the writing of the book. And one of the things that struck me that I went back and reread the chapter on this week was all the Republicans in Washington who said, I'm going to go in the administration to be a guardrail. I'm going to go in the administration to be one of the good guys. I'm going to help control the craziness. I'm going to channel him into conservative policy outcomes. This next administration, if he wins, there will be no good guys. There will be no grown-ups. They will not hire any normies for this operation. It will be the craziest of the crazy. It will be Stephen Miller will look normal by comparison. Seb Gorka will look like a statesman by comparison to these people. So I think it's
no, and they're telegraphing it. I mean, they're being way out in the open that that's exactly what they intend to do.
Sure.
And it's still the press. Again, it can't happen here. There's two sides. The whole thing. The thing.
The both sidesism is going to kill this country. I mean, that's one thing that keeps me awake every night is the idea that we're going to both sides ourselves into this craziness, and it's not both sides. It's one side that is embracing full up absolute tactics.
I do not understand this. All our friends in journalism, this sort of institutional reluctance to just call this stuff out. And at the heart of it really is race.
A lot of it. Yep.
Yeah. And Trump coalition's 85% white, in a country that's 59, 60% white. And I don't understand why we just can't talk about this. It's as if it's unacceptable to just say, this is what is happening.
But that's why I think, again, if I could tell journalists out there, it is to read your book and read Brian's book, because Brian, a journalist, who covered who actually gets what's going on, he calls it for what it is, propaganda. He calls Tucker and Maria Bartiromo and all for what they are, propagandists. He calls it out, and it's clear that he gets what this really is. And if you read your book and you put what he's saying about Fox, and not just Fox, but the rest of that whole outrage propaganda machine, if you're a journalist, you've got to understand that the old rules don't apply. There is no both sides. There's no both sides. As you so succinctly put, Stuart, there are no, how do you tell both sides of a lie? And so it's important to call it what it is, propaganda, to call out the lies, to make, and one of the things he and I were talking about on the podcast is we've got to get louder than the liars.
Absolutely.
That's what the press needs to get louder with the truth than the liars. And this is really critical to us beating this back and winning, not just for Biden or for the pro-democracy side in 2024, but really punishing and calling out this Trumpism and this cult for what it is. It is a dictator wannabe, and they're saying it out loud. I mean,
why? Look, I know we don't, but it still puzzles me almost every day why they still fall into the 2016 frame. Oh, he's joking. Oh, it's just Trump being Trump. It's campaign trail locker room talk. And yet a lot of these journalists who right now from major outlets who are treating this as if it is just some sort of sideshow, some sort of amusement, they're going to be the ones who face the same kind of danger from an authoritarian regime that his political opponents face. And I can't grapple with why they feel so loose about that. Speaking of his political opponents, they're fading by the day. Tim Scott is now out of the race. Rumors are sweeping Tallahassee that Ron DeSantis is considering leaving the race. Breaking little news here. Considering leaving the race because he doesn't want to get his ass kicked and be seen as a loser. There's a division inside Camp DeSantis over this.
You hope the bus breaks down before you get to the game.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Ron and Casey have slowly realized that Jeff Rowe's magical plan of spending $50 million on TV in Iowa is not working. Kim Reynolds apparently did not move the numbers with her endorsement.
Nope.
He's in second, following to third. Joe's theory is I think right, that Nikki's the rising star who's going to take a lick out of Trump in both Iowa and New Hampshire. And while Trump is stronger than all of them, even this process will help us in the general election as it bleeds him a little bit. Because DeSantis' number is not coming out of Trump. It's all coming out of Nikki. And if he goes, it goes to her. Which gives you roughly 30%.
And I also think even though Tim Scott was only polling at 7 in Iowa, I can't believe that any of those 7, that much of them in a choice between Nikki or Trump would go to anywhere but Nikki at this point.
I think I don't have any evidence of it, but empirically, you don't have to know. You don't have to stretch it too far to know that his voters and her voters are affluent Republican suburbanites, not
right. And then you get to South Carolina and the whole thing that happens there. It's more voters of his are likely to go to her.
Right.
So look, early in somewhere in 2022, I kept saying that Biden was going to not only be whether he was going to. All the indications were, if you really looked at the data, that he would defeat Trump, or that there wouldn't be a red wave. Excuse me, because of everyone was screaming, "Oh, the gas prices, everything." You look
inflation,
at
gas prices.
He should be. It's going to be a big red wave. But if you really looked at the numbers underneath those head-to-heads and what was going on, it was pretty clear to me that the red wave was never going to happen. Right. And I still think the thing that people are missing right now, and particularly in these early states, is how vulnerable and weak Donald Trump really is.
Yeah, for sure.
Not necessarily to being taken out for the nomination because of the rules after you get out of New Hampshire and the winner take all thing, but I really still believe, having been through this 10 times since 1979, which dates me big time, that second place in Iowa is what's really going to matter. And with Tim Scott getting out, you've got to believe that Nikki Haley has the edge in taking second place. If you're Ron DeSantis and you're his team, get out now. I mean, get out now, because taking third or even fourth in Iowa is going to finish you. I mean, finish you for good. It'll be the last.
There's an argument he could finish behind Ramaswamy.
yeah, that's what I mean. So get the hell out now.
Probably would.
That may benefit some of Trump. I mean, some of those may go to Trump, but I still think in the end, Nikki Haley taking second in Iowa is going to really propel her into New Hampshire in a way that is going to put a scare. I even think she could beat him there, but it put a scare into Trump and weaken him. I don't have a horse in that race, but if you're sitting there and you're looking at the data that I'm looking at, that's what this race looks like to me right now, is that Trump could be seriously wounded by Nikki Haley if she comes in second in Iowa and then gets a boost. Again, I think part of it is people are and you're seeing this already. Some of Scott's funders, a lot of DeSantis funders are leaving for Trump. Some are leaving Scott and others for Nikki. I think right now, as they get off, is one of these things where the big funders in the Republican Party only have two choices: Trump or Haley.
Right.
And I think if you've been against Trump all this time, I mean, whether it was for DeSantis or Scott, your interest is you'll never get on Trump's good list. Forget that.
No, you're screwed.
You're with us.
So Rick,
you're with us and everybody else. They're going to come after you. So get out now and support him.
The Lincoln Project offers a safe haven for major donors.
Rick, do you think DeSantis will endorse anybody?
Look, I think DeSantis will endorse Trump if he gets out. because his wife wants to be governor now. After when he finishes this term, his wife is sending all the signals across Florida she's running for governor. God help her. And he's now sending signals that he might want to run for the U.S. Senate down the line. Yeah. So, this is a very ambitious family, sort of like the redneck Borgias down here. But I think he endorses Trump because he is essentially at bottom, like most bullies, he's also a coward. And I think he's too afraid to do anything else.
Listen, I see a lot of... I don't know Casey DeSantis as well as you do, but I don't think she's any Lillian Wallace.
I see a lot of people in the chat talking about how, Joe, if Haley wins the nomination, she's going to destroy Biden.
She ain't going to win the nomination, folks.
Yeah, she was. First of all, she's not going to win the nomination. I'm saying she puts a scare into Trump and she weakens him. But second of all, if she does, I've said this before on the strategy session. I'll say it again. You've got to believe that Donald Trump's going to go to the convention, raise his hand in the air, and urge all his MAGA buddies to support, for the good of the country and for the good of the party and for the good of the world. Right. I want you to support my good friend,
good
Nikki
luck with
Haley.
That one.
And like, if you believe that, okay, you may be right. But if that's not going to happen, folks. He's going to sit there and say she stole New Hampshire, the Democrats did something.
It was very, very unfair.
Yeah. And so she's not going to be she may be if she does whoever somehow defeats him for the nomination is a dead person walking in the general election, which is why I don't understand why any of them are going through the exercise in the first place, given that they won't really, attack him for real.
And I think all of this comes down to one of the big questions that we've talked about a little bit. And in the prediction department, Joe, you were talking in the last couple of days about how the good economic news that is actually out there. I mean, people believe the economy is a radioactive hellscape where the living envy the dead and all that, but the actual numbers are pretty good. Talk a little bit about your theory about how that takes a few months to percolate into the politics of the country.
Well, this has been this is not anything new. You had Reagan, who following the inflation and the misery index of Carter, it took 2.5 years of the Reagan administration before any of the economic indicators started to turn. And prior to that, he was 37% of the American people did not want him to run for re-election. He was in a 1-point dead heat with Walter Mondale, who he would destroy in 49 states 14 months later. Obama, at the same period, coming in the Great Recession, this far into his first term, nothing had turned, not fast enough. He was behind Romney. It was just, not a good place to be. Both of them won handily, and we're in very similar straits. And what you learn from that, or what I've learned from it over several presidential runs over 10 cycles, I think, which is, God, I can't believe I've been through that many, but I have, is that when you have this steep economic downturn like we had with, with inflation and Carter administration, and that started with whip inflation now under Gerald Ford. It kept going all the way through Reagan. But when you see that kind of like long slump in the Great Recession and the pandemic, those bad feelings about the economy and the hardship that people go through stick with them for a while. And when it turns, it can turn, it really can turn. I mean, jobs creation can be real. Inflation coming down can be real. Wages outpacing inflation can be real. But to get over that negative depression that people are feeling about how hard things have become, to get over that, it takes 6 to 9 months once that turn actually happens. That's what happened with Reagan. That's why literally 10 months later, it was morning in America. It literally can turn, but it takes time. And so when you see these economic numbers, when you see the GDP, today, the CPI, showing inflation like flat, not growing at all or hardly anything. It means that turn is happening, may have been happening for a couple of months now, but it won't register with somebody who's sitting down during their, writing it with their checkbook, writing the bills and things. It's not going to hit for another 6, maybe 9 months. And what I say to people is, look, we've got a year. If it's 6 to 9 months, there's plenty of time here for that feeling. I mean, that understanding, wait, things aren't on the wrong direction. They're actually moving in the right direction. Maybe not as fast as I'd like, but they are. Do I really want to screw that up and change course? Which was the other Reagan, stay the course.
Stay the course.
So yeah, we right now in that year, 37% of Americans wanted him to run for re-election. I mean, that's not a big number. It sounds very familiar to now. There were actually back then, 70 meant you were dead when you hit 70. Right. In the 80s. There are big questions about his age, et cetera. Very similar situation to right now. And 10, 12 months later, it was Morning in America and Stay the Course was the campaign. No one would have predicted that today. So I still think that the economic indicators are that I would much rather be in the Biden camp than the Trump fascist propaganda, because the rhetoric that about inflation is killing us. Yeah, it was, and it may still be in people's heads. Yeah, but it won't be in 3, 4, 6 months, and I think it won't register the way it's registering today.
Right, Stuart, what are your thoughts right now? I mean, I know everybody's looking for angles where Joe Biden can make progress in this election. It seems to me that this is kind of a big one, linked up with being a champion of freedom.
Yeah, look, I mean, Biden is in the American mainstream. He's a very traditional American candidate. And there's a side of that in the polls, I think, where he's getting punished for it because he's not new. New is still the most powerful word in American advertising. No one has ever introduced a car and says just as good as last year. We haven't screwed up anything. We're addicted to new, and he's not going to be new. But, I think one of the problems that Trump is going to have is when you start at a sort of monk-like scream that he's in, how are you going to ratchet that up? I mean, literally, he's going to be, talking about the Canadians. And, I think that there's something, and we talked about this a lot. You both have written about it a lot. There's something very exhausting about anger. And there's nothing hopeful here. That's what really struck me about that last debate. There was no unifying vision. There was no reason to feel that, this person on stage, if president, is going to make me feel better about myself or better about the country. There's no lifting up. It's all sort of zero sum that, you're going to be better maybe because somebody else is going to be worse. So look, we've all done a million campaigns. The question you always ask yourself every night, would you rather be your guy or the other guy? And, if I was in Biden world, I'd rather be Biden than Trump. And that's it. That's really all that matters. And I think probably Biden will be behind until Democratic convention. But look, I think there's a turn here that Biden is going to start embracing being an underdog.
Yeah.
And he's underdog fighting for values that we care. We like that.
And I think embracing freedom and democracy, which he's really been out front on much more in the last few months. And I think that it is a huge strength that is now undercounted. I also think Biden as a foreign policy president is going to help him tremendously as we go into next year, because if the progress in Ukraine continues and Biden continues to be sort of a go-to international figure, I think there's going to be a lot more Reagan-esque style lift underneath those issues, which was unexpected for the Democrats. Hey, so guys, we're getting on in the hour, but I wanted to take some audience questions. You guys up for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Fire them at me there, Sam. If Trump wins, what does the GOP do? They worship him like a golden god. And honestly, they race themselves to do his bidding. He will not. This will not be America like you think of it today. They will obey him no matter how illegal or crazy or cruel or sick or weird. That's my take on it. I think it's an abject collapse.
Absolutely. Read all the stuff that the Trump people are putting out right now about their plans, the 2025 plan. They will run in lockstep to do it. It will be the end of democracy as we know it.
Yep. All right.
We're a careful bunch.
We are really. I'm a ray of damn sunshine.
Well, but that's why we have to keep doing the work. I mean, that's
that's a true fact.
Yep,
that's a true fact. All right, let's get another question in. What if Biden falls ill or worse? If your number's up, your number's up. We got to play it by ear. Nobody knows what the outcome will be. Let's hope he doesn't fall ill or worse. Look, I think there's equal odds that Donald Trump, chokes on a Big Mac. At this point, he's not a healthy guy.
There's more of a chance. I actually think there's a better chance of Trump falling ill or worse than Biden at this point. But as Rick says, you don't know. Deal with it when it comes.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Stuart, you take this one. What to do about Joe Manchin?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Joe Manchin is going to run because I think Joe Manchin is going to want to go out winner. Same reason I don't think Larry Hogan is going to win. Hogan's the last Republican governor to be elected in 50 years, I think. I think that's how he wants to retire. It's always better to say you could have won than to get crushed.
Right.
So,
right.
Manchin's a guy that he's run for office his entire life. He doesn't know what to do if he's not running for office. So I think it's almost sort of instinctual that he has to trail this out there. But at the end of the day, he's going to not want to go out a loser. He's going to want to do what's best for his daughter's
lobbying business.
Incredible lobbying business. So, somebody's going to offer him a lot of money to do this or that, be on this board or that board. And I would not be surprised if he, at a certain point, starts maneuvering for a cabinet position in a second Biden administration.
Or a Trump administration.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he would take both.
He'd take either.
Either or.
Let's do one more question, folks. Who are Trump's potential VPs? Nancy Mace is very high and hot on the list right now among a lot of Trump world people. She's.
I could see that.
As a former Trump world person told me, look at the hair and makeup in the last couple of months. It's a totally different style and look, and it's a giveaway. Like suddenly she looks like a Fox News anchor, not like the sort of basic congressperson from South Carolina that she used to. Carrie Lake really wanted it, not going to get it. Nancy Mace is a congresswoman from the great state of South Carolina. So, who else, guys? Who else is on your Trump short list?
Well, what about the governor of South Dakota? Although maybe
Kristi Noem.
I mean, in Trump world, having an affair with Lewandowski is not disqualifying, obviously. So
clearly, because a lot of his other advisors did.
But is having an affair with Kevin McCarthy disqualified? I don't know.
I don't know. That was why she got pissy with him, according to the constant DC rumor mill. So, again, folks, Trump will there will be two sets of thought on who Trump's VP will be. Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles will have one list, and Trump will see somebody one night on a late night infomercial and say, she's very hot, she looks the part, central casting, I want that one.
So let me ask you guys a question real quickly. Do you think anybody would, say, God forbid you were working for Trump, who would you tell him to pick? I mean, we don't have to worry about Trump taking our advice because God knows, we're contrary indicators. But is there anybody out there who would help Trump?
I think having a woman would be helpful for Trump, but it can't be a Carrie Lake who's too edge case. Noam might actually help him. Kristi Noem might actually help him. But it's difficult because he does like darken the sun. And in that way, Mike Pence was like the perfect VP for him because he's like wallpaper, fading into the background. So, all right, guys, let's get to the final question of what are you guys looking at this week? Stu, we'll start with you.
Look, I think that there's two existential fights going on out there. And America's on the right side of both of them, and we should encourage the president to follow and do everything we can to be on the right side. It really goes to what are your values? Do you believe in a pluralistic society? Do you believe in a society where it's legal and acceptable to be gay? Do you believe in a society that is not fundamentally racist, and a society that will tell the truth and debate the truth and be self-critical? And when you come down to that, there's two right now that are in wars, Ukraine and Israel. And I think that what happens in both of those, if you just imagined what would happen if Ukraine loses to Russia, which is not inconceivable, probably likely if a Republican is elected. And somehow if Israel falters in this effort, say what you will about Israel. I worked a lot in Israel. The single most critical pieces, editorials I have ever read about Israel were published by Israelis.
Yes.
It is really, and you have to love that about that country because they are continually self-critical. They ask themselves very tough questions. It's a unique moment like this. I don't think we've seen something like this since probably 1939. And let's hope that democracy and positive humanity and pluralism wins.
Joe, what are you looking for this week?
Well, I'm going to follow this. Julia Davis at the Daily Beast had a tweet out today about Ukraine charging Rudy Giuliani's top local ally in Ukraine with Moscow-linked treason. She said in the SBU said that, which is the Ukrainians security. Said that Oli Dubinsky and Derkash and others are being charged with joining an organization formed by the chiefs of Russia's military intelligence, which it's fascinating. This just happened. And it's kind of like one of these things where it's starting to show that more evidence that the Russian hoax was anything but a Russian hoax. Yeah, it was just a hoax. So, and Giuliani is caught up in this again. And if there's anything that Giuliani, yes, everything.
How does his life get worse?
Dies, but we got to come up with one of those for Rudy. I don't know. Die runs down, whatever. But anyway, it's a fascinating story that you check it out, Julia Davis on Daily Beast. But it doesn't sound like that's going away, folks. It sounds like there's more there. And it's something I'm going to be following over the next couple of weeks.
I am keeping an eye out right now on Mike Johnson, who it looks like he is compromised with enough Democrats to get a continuing resolution through to temporarily keep the government open. This is going to attract all of the usual nuisances like Matt Gaetz and others. He may get this first CR done, but I think he has betrayed their idea that he was going to be this hyper transgressive bomb thrower. So I think he may be next on the chopping block. We may be back to a speaker fight sometime in December or January because Johnson is getting a lot of ire from the crazies. Mm-hmm. So, hey, well, with that, folks, I just want to say, and by the way, that's not me standing Mike Johnson, everybody. He's a dangerous, weird, creepy Christian nationalist dude, and I have no truck for him. I'm pointing out what I think is happening on the ground up there. But anyway, everybody, listen, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We appreciate you one and all. We will be back again next week, I believe, for another episode of the strategy session. I want to thank you, Joe and Stuart, for joining me tonight. I'm out on the porch, folks. It's a stormy evening. If you've been hearing weird noises, it's because the rain and the wind are blowing. But appreciate you all, and we'll see you again next time.
Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Thanks for joining.